Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm Bonnie Worth, and this is The Way Through. Of course, this is the show where we take a look of the mind body spirit connection through the lens of mediumship, metaphysics, and of course, looking at how it is that we can co create our lives, how we can become more engaged, more practiced, more aware in terms of what it is that we are creating, taking that ultimate responsibility for what we're putting out into the universe, and of course the results that are showing up in our life. Today's show, I mean, we're diving into a powerful topic here today. We're going to be discussing vulnerability and vulnerability as a catalyst for healing. This is really, very often vulnerability is perceived or understood as being a weakness, but understanding the true essence of vulnerability really can allow us to transform our lives for the better. It absolutely helps us to connect deeper to our authentic self. We become in a deeper relationship with our emotions, with understanding our belief systems, and of course, more than anything, nurturing that deeper connection of compassion for, as I said, for ourselves, but more importantly, compassion for the human condition as well as for each other. There's deeper connection, and how do we move forward as humanity? How do we move forward in the scope of everything that's been playing up in our lives or in the global scale over the last several years? It really is through this ability to forego the judgments and nurture deeper relationships with ourselves, with our higher power, and of course with each other. A place of vulnerability, a vulnerability that is seen as being a gift and of grace than what it is in terms of weakness. But first we need to understand, based on that human condition, what is this perception of vulnerability? What is it based on our belief systems, our paradigms, and what are we operating in that leads us to believe that vulnerability is of the weakness? Well, one of the common rooted aspects of this are the cultural narratives, our cultural, or we could say our inherited conditioning that comes forward that says we need to prioritize the inner strength, prioritize that innate ability of resilience. Now, last week on the show, I talked about authentic resilience. If you were tuning in for the very first time, I really want to invite you to go back and listen to the previous shows, especially the one last week where I talked about authentic resilience, because it's so different than what is this prioritization of this innate resilience. We have, as a society, as a people, as within paradigms and beliefs, that we need to always be tough. We need to suck it up. We need to get over it. We need to push through. And so, that's we often glorify being strong. We glorify this innate resilience, and yet it's actually a detriment to us because we don't actually recognize that vulnerability is the superpower here. Vulnerability is what is going to allow for the opening to that greater authentic expression. So when we look at the roots of this perception, this is normal for us. It's what our society, our culture, especially here in our Western society, we celebrate independence and self-sufficiency and stoicism. This is, from a very young age, based on the conditioning, we're taught that showing emotions, especially fear and uncertainty and sadness, equates to weakness. Again, this is where, toughen up. This is, suck it up, get over it. This is where, again, where we've been conditioned to believe that vulnerability is risky. We need to be strong in the workplace. We need to be strong in our families. We need to be more emotionally restraining of how we feel, because in some way it's wrong or it's bad or it's weak to be seen in a vulnerable state. And I know that even, when I look at the things that were said about me or to me, over the years, or especially as a young child, I was always judged as being too sensitive. I was too emotional. I was all of these things that were, too much for everybody else. And I get it to some degree. I mean, there's a lot of personality here, but there's all of these things that were deemed or judged as being too much, and being too emotional was a real big component. So it really is what taught me to not be emotional, to hold back, and to be strong, and that there was something about the emotional container that I live in, the emotional, energy that I live and exist and experience every single day as a medium. That this was somehow, of course, that it was very, very wrong to be this emotionally affected by things. So, we get into shutting it down and suppressing emotion and all of those things that that I've talked about on the previous shows. We can also look at what is the historical context of this as well. I mean, throughout history, we can look, society, we've revered courage, we've revered determination, being able, displaying any emotion or openness is often overlooked. And again, what earns our respect and admiration in each other is how strong we are and how contained we are and how we're able to handle things without becoming emotional about it. And I think this is really, a big thing for women. Like, I don't know about, your experiences in the workplace or things like that. Even as women, we've had to suppress our emotions to show up in the masculine, in more of a masculine energy, to get things done, to not get emotional about the things, to keep things very logical, very directed, very focused, very business-like, and keep emotions out of the equation. And so we've really been, like I said, through this need to maintain this stoicism is what earns the recognition. And yet these biases are the very things that are a interplay of those paradigms and those beliefs that are, that are getting in the way, that are limiting, that says it's not safe for us to open up and be vulnerable, or we that being having feelings is less commendable than what it is as being tough and strong and resilient. There's also, a big factor in this, why we get into avoiding our vulnerability is really the fear of judgment. The fear of being judged and ridiculed, really prevents so many of us from expressing our truth, expressing and being vulnerable about how we feel, being vulnerable about, the impact of a situation that may have had on us, how we really feel about what has happened, or what is, the decision that's at play. We worry about opening up. It's that fear of rejection. It reinforces this idea that vulnerability is a liability to us. And this can be especially potent not only in, when we look at, our workplaces, but it can be especially potent when you are looking to heal from trauma and heal through your wounding, that it's not safe to be vulnerable. And yet vulnerability is the very thing that opens up to there being a capacity to receive the help and support that's needed in order to heal and move forward. And so, that pressure to not only prove ourselves, that pressure to hold things in, to be tough, the pressure to be resilient, it really can overshadow our need for authenticity, our need for truth, or the expression of the truth and the expression of the rawness of what we're dealing with. I think, we can look in terms of, the fear of judgments, even in terms of to be diagnosed, as with mental illness or anything like that. There's such a pushback on being labeled in those ways. And I know even for a long time, for me, even personally, as I said on my journey, that fear of vulnerability, that fear of being judged, of being ridiculed, of not of being too emotional, all of those things, or the fact that even admitting the fact that I was unhappy or that I was depressed was something that, really prevented me from getting the help that I so desperately needed. That fear of vulnerability, for me to admit that I was struggling somehow diminished my strength. And that, people would say, oh, you're so strong, and they would admire the strength. And so I struggled, because for me, admitting that I was hurting, admitting that I wasn't okay, admitting that I was, depressed, and I was feeling hopeless, and I was so overcome by the pain of my past, was somehow diminishing what was that reputation that I had for being strong and being resilient. And it was that fear that led me to deny the truth. And I couldn't, it was like everything, it was the very reason why I didn't feel I was strong enough to confront my wounding, to confront the pain. It really worked against me. I was depressed. I was severely depressed. I was suicidal. And instead of facing my pain, I just continued to bury it down, right? Building up that suppression of all those emotions. And I put up walls around myself to protect myself from being hurt anymore, and also to protect myself from that scrutiny or that those judgments that I felt were, were there. And I mean, did I feel that they were there? Yes, they were probably part of what were my own mind projections of what was there, or how people would think or how they would react. And then I think, from a psychic perception of things, also knowing that there was the judgment there, that again, it wasn't safe for me. It wasn't safe to be vulnerable. It wasn't safe to expose. It wasn't safe to tell to tell my truth, because my past, based on the experiences I had, of course, had led me to believe and understand differently. I was operating in the belief systems and paradigms that were moving me further away from being able to receive the help that I so desperately needed. I remember, to point on this was sitting in the doctor's office. And again, the doctor was going through a list of questions. I think this is after I had my third child, and going through, because I was really struggling. I wasn't sleeping. Things were showing up in my health, and so he was doing an evaluation to see if depression was a part of the equation. And when I realized what he was doing, when he started asking me questions about my mental health, I instinctively gave him all of the quote unquote right answers so that I could present a picture of someone who was doing just fine. I'm okay. I'm doing fine. I'm not, I totally, prevented myself from being helped in that moment. I feared that if I expressed my true feelings, that I would be labeled as depressed, and I really didn't, I it felt like a stigma that I just couldn't bear, in addition to everything that I was dealing with. So, it's like in moments like that, where we can become more concerned about how we appear to other people instead of acknowledging what we require for our own well being. And I know that I felt that being vulnerable, even with my doctor, would expose me, and it would, label me. And it was, like I said, it was the very thing that created this massive barrier to my healing. Because had I been able to admit my struggles early, I would have been able to, get some help and support for the state that I was in. I also believe in some way that that was also, guided in that moment, because maybe it wasn't, through traditional medicines or traditional therapies that, really aligned with what I required in terms of helping and supporting me to know my well-being in all aspects of my life, physically, mentally, emotionally, as well as spiritually. But in some way, when we look at that fear of vulnerability, it really prolongs our suffering. It is what keeps us, in, tied into or connected or entangled with the stories and narratives of our past. And so, like myself, we can deny ourselves the opportunity for that genuine help and support that we are so worthy of receiving. And honestly, it wasn't until I began to unravel these inherited beliefs about my strength, about strength and about weakness, that I could finally step forward more into accepting that vulnerability, is essential. It's not even, I don't even want to say that it's this courageous act. I really look at it as being an essential component to be able to reclaim a sense of wellness in our lives. And I know for myself, when I started to dismantle all of those walls that I had built up around me, that, that self-preservation, the self-protection, it's what allowed me to confront how I felt, what was really going on. It's what actually gave me the strength. Vulnerability gave me the strength to confront the shadows, the traumas, the pain of the past. And again, it's what I truly needed. Vulnerability really created the pathway where again I was able to cultivate the authentic resilience, as opposed to just, moving forward or pretending it out of my reality. So we look at some of the implications of these belief systems. Let's say it's not safe to be vulnerable, or vulnerability is a weakness, or that if we expose our vulnerable self, that we're going to be rejected in some way. And so it leads to emotional suppression. It just continues to add to it. So this we suppress our true feelings. That's what I did. I suppressed the fact that I was severely depressed, that I wasn't functioning healthfully, that we can this emotional suppression leads to stress, it leads to anxiety, and of course we know and understand holistically it's what is at the basis of every physical illness or ailment that we have. And so it manifests in dis-ease within our body. And so ignoring our emotions is a part of what creates that internal conflict, and it also creates more of that mental strain for us as well. It's really hard to have a positive state of mind or to be optimistic when we have all of this emotional upheaval happening inside of us. It's really almost like this passive energy where we appear completely fine on the outside to people, but inside we're boiling over, we're fuming, we are in an absolute state of chaos inside. And so ignoring our emotional selves, or ignoring our truth, or the fear of vulnerability, it just creates more of an internal conflict for us. But it's also the thing that actually can hinder our growth. As I said earlier, this is our it's seen as this negative trait, and so we can skip over these opportunities where we can that are very valuable experiences, where we can actually foster our well-being. It's where we can foster our healing. And as I said, vulnerability is the gateway to having a deeper understanding of ourselves, a deeper understanding of our needs, what we need, what we require, what it is that might help or support us in moving forward. It's vulnerability is really what is this gateway that allows us to recognize our state of worthiness, of just saying, we're worthy of having help, we're worthy of support, we're worthy of being nurtured, we are worthy of being loved and supported. And so when we are suppressing anything and we are viewing vulnerability as a negative trait, we're missing out on the opportunity to really nurture that and cultivate that from that innate or that deeper place inside of us. So it really, it also prevents us from, that meaningful connection to who we truly are, but a meaningful connection that, from in community with other people, in friendships. It really it impairs our relationships, because our relationships, thrive on trust and openness and vulnerability. And when we have been conditioned in such a way that we are hesitant to show our true self, the relationships can become very superficial. We're pretending to be someone we're not, or people get this is again where we fall into that trap of meeting the expectations of other people. And again, if you're tuning in for the first time, you might be interested in going back and listening to the show of the weight of expectation, because it really is, all of this is what leads to these feelings of isolation and loneliness, and just reinforces the cycles not only of our emotional suppression, but the cycles of what our self-sabotage, the cycle where we're just, it doesn't matter how hard we try, we can never get ahead. The cycles that are prevalent within the conditioning, within the aspects of our inherited conditioning, the cycles of our karmic cycles, all of that are tied and become very impaired as a result. So we want to make sure that we want to look at reframing vulnerability. And I mean, this is why you're tuning into today's show, because in order to understand that vulnerability is actually the embodiment of strength in its truest form. And when we can embrace our vulnerability, which means we are willing to confront our past, we're allowing for genuine relationship to ourself and to our higher power and to other people. When we're allowing for that, it's really everything that creates the spaciousness and creates the openness for us to really experience the deepest and most profound of healing, but really what gives almost the grandiose aspect of permission permission for us to really be authentic, to be who we are, to express our deepest truths, wants, and desires into the universe, as well as, being able to come forward in revealing, like it's the very thing that gave me the strength to reveal the very fact that I'm a medium, and coming forward and being able to be genuine and forthright and upfront and honest about it. And so, we look at all of these spiritual attributes. We look at the honesty and our integrity and our faithfulness and all of these things. It's actually vulnerability is what leads to all of it. It's like in when we can understand that it is the true embodiment of strength. It is the true embodiment of unconditional love, where we are so willing to be open and honest and forthright in everything, that it really paves the way for us to be able to have this, have a great life and have great relationships, and to know who we are, and more importantly, to be really grounded in who we are, to be totally grounded and embracing, every part of us, the, what's the good that exists inside of us, and those shadow aspects of our personalities, when we're able to just, be willing to expose it all and just to be, who we are, is where our greatest, not only greatest transformation comes from, but our greatest experience with life comes from. So, again, at its core, vulnerability is really about being open and honest, with our, not only about ourselves in the moment, and honest about, the deeper truths of ourselves, but honest about our feelings, honest about the impact of that experiences have had on us. And it takes immense courage to be able to expose our inner self in that way. And it is the ultimate act of, I want to say, of being of bravery. It really is. It's not about us being able to show up on the field to defend our point of view, and to, bravery isn't about encountering the beasts out in the world, so to speak. Our bravery comes from our ability to be able to confront and to admit what's going on inside of us. And that's really where the true potential for us to experience, of course, the deeper healing really comes from. So, acknowledging our pain instead of hiding it is what invites for this transformation. And our vulnerabilities, once we begin to dismantle the barriers that are keeping us from our healing, we can really start to confront our wounds with greater compassion, greater understanding. And again, when I talk about dismantling the barriers, this is where, again, we need to dismantle the conditioning. What are those things that we've inherited? What have we taken on? What have we been led to believe about ourselves as actually not true? And what if there's a different truth that is looking to be revealed or understood? And so we need to look at what are the paradigms, not only our personal paradigms that we're operating in, but we also need to take a look at whose paradigm am I abiding to? That's where, again, the where we almost that state of, where we look at how codependency really begins to take form, is when we are operating under the conditioning of someone else's paradigm, what they believe is right and best, what their needs and wants are. And again, as I said, go back and listen to the previous episode on weighted expectation, because it really is what helps us to understand why we begin, especially as empaths, why we move into putting the needs of other people before us. And it doesn't mean that we don't want to help. We are at our core, we are here to help and serve and support other people. But we also need to understand it's not in the compromise of our own well-being. It's not in compromising our deeper truth in order for that to happen. And so, we look at, this being able to dismantle the belief systems and the paradigms and the things that we've been led to believe about ourselves that weren't even true in the first place, that they were, it's what we were carrying, it's what we were holding, it's what we had taken on, that, from, whether it be taken on through what we've inherited, or taken on from the world around us, or what led to believe to be true about ourselves based on our previous experiences in our life. So it really becomes this deeper work to begin to pull it all apart and to begin to separate it out and to take a look at what's really true and where is my truth and what do I know is right and best for me, and really honoring that more than anything. But that really is significantly one of the benefits that can come through vulnerability, because vulnerability is what fosters that self awareness. It gives us this opportunity to truly examine ourselves. We can examine our experiences. We can, our trauma, our grief, our rejection, the very things that have shaped our lives to this point of where they are, so that we can, really lead to understand ourselves better. To more importantly, identify our pain source. What is the pain source? Where is it that I'm holding it in my body? Where is this coming from? What has this led me to believe about myself? And is there something is there a different thought or a different idea that I can formulate or have that would be more beneficial to supporting what is, that nurturement or compassion inside of me? But when we can look at, looking, instead of being afraid of being vulnerable, that we can use this as a tool of our own self-discovery, and a self-discovery in terms of, who we truly are. Who is that person that sits at the core of ourselves, at the very beingness inside of us? What does that person know and understand? It's really what brings us into connection with our higher self. Because when we are dismantling all of the conditioning, when we are giving ourselves permission to move forward, into what is the, that pain point, where is the source of that pain, and we're willing to address it and meet it and be with it, that it's the very thing that begins to shed all of the layers. Everything begins to dissolve and fall away. That illusion that we were holding, that of our own perception, begins to fall away. The facades begin to be dissolved, and what begins to be revealed is the higher self, this deeper truth, this greater awareness of what it is that we're truly worthy and deserving of experiencing and living within our lives. And it's the very thing that begins to shift our vibration and allowing for, what is looking to manifest for our lives to come in. We can look at, manifestation of being those prayers that we've been asked, that we've been putting out, those things that we've been asking for, whether we are asking, our angels and guides, or we're asking our loved ones on the other side, or asking the universe, those prayers that are going out to our source, that we're looking to what is to be received. It's like we need to let go of everything that is weighing us down in our energy, everything that's weighing us down in our emotional body, in order to put us into a greater state of receiving for ourselves. But in receiving for ourselves comes from ultimately this nurturement of this state of worthiness, really being, this state of worthiness that is there, that is a part of us, and that, but we need to cultivate it, we need to honor it, we need to choose it. And we need to choose us, time and time again. And it's through our vulnerability that we begin to break some of that cycle. What I've also come to understand is that as we become willing to embrace the vulnerability, it's actually what helps to break the cycles that we get caught in, the cycles of our shame. And this is, I have working with a very wonderful and beautiful client of mine where, based on her traumas of her past, that she falls into patterns of shame immediately when something goes awry, whether it goes awry in the workplace, whether it goes in her personal life, in friendships and relationships. It's the good girl syndrome that takes place. I'm going to talk about that on the show coming up in another conversation. But it's a syndrome where we need to always be good and meeting the needs, that codependency that takes place, where we are constantly looking for a state of acceptance and approval from other people because we're not in a place of acceptance and approval of within our own self. But there's a cycle of shame that is often tied to our wounding. And that shame traps us in those cycles of self-judgment, of isolation, and again really reinforces that fear of rejection that can play up for us. And so when we can look at allowing ourselves the privilege of vulnerability, we get into a place of, not only being able to share what's going on inside of us, we allow ourselves to be fully seen. And it's through this radical acceptance that we really free ourselves from the shaming cycle that we fall into. And we move into more of a place of empathy, of compassion, and of understanding. And my favorite word is grace, to be able to have the grace to move forward from anything that has happened to like through the past, letting go of the narratives, and really through the grace of being able to come into this presence, the presence of who we are, and this present time. So we're no longer tied up and living in the shadow of the past, but we're in a conscious place and a co-creative state that we're looking to advance and move forward and to expand and up level the quality of our life and the quality of how we feel. So, we look at, again, last week I talked about authentic resilience. And so this is really, it's vulnerability that leads way to it. It's the very thing that it's where true resilience comes from. It requires vulnerability, is the spirit coming forward. It's the brave spirit, not the wounded or suffering spirit, but the one who is brave, the one who is open, the one who knows what they're worthy and deserving of. And so it's not always easy. Like, I don't want to take this away. I don't want to negate how challenging vulnerability can be and how challenging it is to be honest and forthright in how we feel and what we believe. It absolutely is. It's very difficult. But when we start to take steps towards this, that when we are honest about our feelings, yes, it's going to expose us to, the judgments of other people, but our full acceptance of ourselves. This is what demonstrates, that the self-acceptance. This is where, again, where we are so good about who we are, that it's okay if people judge us. It's okay if they don't believe us. It's okay if they think we're weird or different or we've got it all wrong. It doesn't matter, because we know our truth. We know where we're coming from. We know what's right and best for us. And so it takes courage. It really takes courage. It takes courage to be able to, confront not only the shadows and pain of our past and the wound. It takes courage to share our struggles. It takes courage to say, I'm not okay, and I'm depressed, or I'm really, I haven't been able to get out of bed, or it takes courage to say, I'm not happy in my life. And this openness, it's not just about, where we look at this aspect where we're just coping and getting by. It actually, invulnerability is what allows us to adapt to what the changes that need to take place, where we've been honest, we've been forthright, we've shared our struggles, we are creating spaciousness for empathy and understanding, and we become more grounded in who we are, and we become more grounded in our shared humanity. And it's that which really allows, that transformative force. That's where we really unlock our remarkable ability to be our own healers and facilitate the healing, and to be more, authentic in our relationships, and, all of the things that I talk about here on the show. So, we look at, embracing our vulnerability. It's a process, and it gives us an opportunity to, break down, I say, break down the barriers, or break free from what are those harmful patterns of shame and fear and self-sabotage, those things that, get in the way of us, of being, of having a healthy, wonderful relationship with who we are, but also a healthy and wonderful relationship, with people around us. So we really need to look at honoring those things that we make us feel vulnerable. And so, I really encourage you to sit down with your journal, with your pen, with your paper, and just begin to ask yourself some reflective questions. What is it that I'm holding on to that I'm afraid to share with others? Even just having that conversation with ourselves, that willingness to be vulnerable and honest with ourselves, is so therapeutic. It's so, where we get to just express what we've locked inside of us. We get to get real and honest, and we get to take a look at, what it is we're feeling, what it is that we've kept trapped, based on maybe the barriers, the conditioning, the things that are there, the paradigms that are operating. And we need to be willing to take a look at what's holding us back. And so we can ask ourselves questions like that. We can ask ourselves, what is the worst thing that would happen if I was truly honest about how I feel? We need to take a look. We need to have that consideration. What is the worst thing that could happen? Which means we are so afraid of the bad happening that we try to avoid it at all costs. And this is really the invitation to take a look at it. This is just between you and you. Get an understanding of what is the worst thing that could happen, which means, that, yeah, you know what? If you were truly honest about how you felt, the worst thing to happen is yes, someone might not understand and someone might judge you. Absolutely. That's a truth that could be sitting there, but we can't be afraid of that truth either. We need to be accepting of all facets of what this means. And if we can accept it first, if we can take a look at it first, then fear is no longer stopping us, because now we've identified the things that could possibly go awry and the things that could happen. It's like I might upset someone if I was truly honest about how I feel. The worst thing that could happen is that somebody wouldn't understand. But what is the best thing that could happen if I was truly honest about how I feel? Well, the best thing that could happen is I could actually receive the help that I've been denying myself. I could actually find someone who would understand. I would actually be able to unlock what has been holding me back so I can truly be manifesting this life and these experiences that I know I'm deeply worthy and deserving of. Being able to take a look at both let's call them the pros and the cons of this in through our own self-reflection allows us it all to come to the table. Now we've got everything in front of us, which means now we get to make the decision as to what's best going to support us in moving forward. And chances are, if you are really committed to your healing journey and you are really committed to being able to move beyond the barriers, move beyond what's been holding you back and what's been boiling over inside of you. When you are so committed to doing it, you're going to you will choose. You will make the decision to choose to be vulnerable and open because you're looking for the support. You're seeking it, and you're at a place of really being able to receive the help and support that's out there. Sometimes that help and support isn't in the people who are necessarily around us, but when we can be open and honest, and with family, and open and honest with our doctor even, then we can be directed, we can be guided, we can be led to the person who will be able to help or support us in moving forward. So we really, you not only, and when I say being led, we might be led by a friend or a doctor or a family member in some way, but we're also open ourselves to be led by the universe. We open ourselves to be led to the synchronicities, to the people, the events, the circumstances that are best going to help and support our becoming becoming who we truly are, becoming happy, becoming at peace, becoming all those things that we may be craving or seeking for in our life. So this the first step in all of this is getting vulnerable with ourselves, being willing to take a look at what's really going on inside of us. How do we really feel? What is stopping and halting us? What is it that we've been led to believe about ourselves that isn't true? What is it that we've been hanging on to that was never ours to hang on to in the first place? What is it? What is it that we need to let go of in order to truly become who we are, and become in terms of a greater authentic expression, really aligning with what is the higher self so that we can really know more ease, more joy, and flow in our lives. So we need to, be willing to confront it all, and we need to process it, and we need space and grace, and sometimes we need help and support to do that, of course, as well. So, we can look at this is, vulnerability ultimately. I mean, it enriches our lives. It enriches this connection to who we are. It enriches and opens us up to the guidance of the universe, to be able to receive the help and support from the divine, from these beings who are on the other side in the unseen world, who are there to help and support us. I mean, I know from not only all the readings I've done, but through my engagement with the other side and with those who have crossed, they want nothing more than for us to be happy. And they want nothing more than to help and support us in being able to cultivate that and find our way to the help and support that we need. And so, it might feel like you're isolated, it might feel like you're alone, but if you could just see the support that was around you at any given time, you wouldn't be afraid. You wouldn't be afraid to open up. You wouldn't be afraid to ask for help. You wouldn't be afraid to risk it all in order to move forward, to really claim the life that is looking to find you. So, this is, how do we break free and how do we move forward? Will it really just start, by empowering ourselves with grace through life's challenges, of course, but more importantly, empowering ourselves with the willingness to be open and vulnerable. And even if we begin by only being vulnerable with ourselves, by just starting there, and then it's from that point that we can, find our way. The path opens up. The clarity, it's like the light can find us through the darkness of anything that we've been going through. So, my sweet friends, I just, really was looking in this. Of course, if you are someone who is in need of help and support, by all means, please get in touch with me. I mean, even if it's a matter of, guidance, or if it's a matter of direction, or you want to really dive deep into your healing journey, by all means, please feel free to reach out. And of course, if, especially if something resonated here for you on the show, I really encourage you to let me know. And of course, I'm always open to help and support, everyone on their path forward, so that you can truly become who you are, to become, and so that your life can become what you've been praying it to become. So we look at, vulnerability as I, kind of wrapping up here now. I just want to say, to know and understand at the core, this is not a weakness, that this is this extraordinary testament to the true strength of our spirit. It is the our capacity for transformation. It's what allows us to really move beyond the very things that have happened to us and become more conscientious through the choices that we're making, that are shaping our reality, that are allowing us to receive the things that we're looking to manifest in our lives. And so as we begin to shed the layers, and as we begin to open up to the transformative power, by a vulnerability, we really allow ourselves to engage with life in a whole different way, engage with others, but more importantly, engage with the universe, where again it raises the vibration. It's a whole shift of energy that we live and breathe and exist in as a result. So we look at anything based on, what the things that have happened in our past. Not only are there the emotional and implications and the challenges of our mind and the paradigms and operating systems that are there, the barriers that hold us back. But there's also the energy container of everything, and everything holds energy, and our past holds energy. And when we're constantly engaging in the narratives of our past, we're constantly igniting or activating and continuing to engage with the energy of the past as well, which just becomes even more of a detriment to us being able to find our way through, to have the reprieve and the relief that we're looking for. And so when we look at this aspect of where we're saying we're making this commitment to change, this commitment to begin to be open and honest, even to ourselves, to become really uh, I would say vulnerable in terms of what we require and what we need, and we begin to explore that we begin to shift energy. We begin to shift out of the energy of the past, just like we let go of the beliefs and we unravel the conditioning. We're letting go of all of the energy that's been holding us stuck and trapped in all of that experience as well. And we begin to cultivate new energy. We begin to align with our higher selves. It's of higher vibration, it's of greater flow, it's of greater ease, and it's of much more nurturing and supportive energy, we have more energy. We feel, the energy that we're experiencing in our life begins to be expressed in a completely different way. And ultimately, we need to be very conscientious of not only of what the impact of the energy around us, but of course, who we are being in the world, what we are expressing into the world. So any shift or change that we make to begin to, to heal and move beyond the pain and suffering in our lives, any shift that we do it, we're making an energetic shift that's actually contributing in support of to everybody out there. It's like a wave of good that begins to be expressed, to everyone who is in a place to accept and receive the energy that we are emitting or bringing forward as well. So we begin to understand that the impact of how we live our life, the impact of how we feel, the impact of what we experience can be in detriment to our well-being because of the energy behind it, or it can be in support of our well-being, but it also to understand it can be detrimental or impactful, let's say, to the well-being of others, to humanity, to the world around us. Or we can be in an energy that allows us to give more love, to be more light, to be more joy-filled and expressive of what is our truth. And anytime we do that, we create a pathway and opening for other people to do the very same thing. So, my sweet friends, I thank you so much for being a part of the conversation here today. As again, if there's something I shared here on the show, please, by all means, comment, like, and share this episode with someone you feel who would benefit. And of course, I really appreciate always for you taking time out to be here with me here today. And, as I always say, my greatest prayer is that something that I share is going to help and support you on your way through whatever is coming up in your life. Until next week, sweet friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Bye for now.